Morning all. Let's have a look at game 10 now. So Topalov was playing white. He kicked off with d4. Anand played knight f6, and after c4 Anand played g6. So he's either going to play the King's Engine defence or the Gruenfeld at this point. After knight c3 he declares his intention. He plays d5, the Gruenfeld defence. So this is a kind of hyper-modern system which black is encouraging white to build up the centre to try and destroy it later. So it's through the beaten path of the previous game now, game 1, where Topalov had a crushing victory. So it's interesting to see where Anand deviated from game 1 and perhaps why, some of the positional considerations. So after knight takes d5, e4, this is all standard stuff. Black captures on c3, white takes on c3, and now bishop g7. So that bishop is putting a lot of pressure on the d4 square as usual, and the usual Gruenfeld plan is to exert more pressure later on with moves like this. So it's all about d4 for the moment. Bishop c4 and now c5, striking at the centre. Knight e2, which mentioned in game 1 video annotation. It's more flexible here because like bishop g4 can be answered with f3 for example, and it's also supporting c3 in case d5 is played later. In fact, in this game d5 is played later. I'm not sure it's a brilliant move, and it may have been useful though to sidestep Anand's preparation. So anyway, knight c6, bishop e3, both sides now castle. Okay, so now here is the deviation. In game 1, Anand had played knight a5, which I think is the more usual move. The bishop moves back, and then e5 was played at some point later by black. It might have been immediately, but here Anand deviated with the move b6. And you know, he had played b6 as well in game 1, but it's a different move. The knight's still on c6. So what are the key differences at the moment? I think actually without black playing e5, you know, white's not able to go into that gambit kind of system, you know, sacking d4 pawn to get a vicious attack. So Anand's sidestepping that plan as well to play e5. Bishop b7, it as a principled move, is trying to get the bishop on that diagonal, and later to try and encourage white perhaps to play a move like e5 to get a grip on these light squares, in particular like d5 and e4 later. So white supported d4 a bit more, and the d file generally he's going to build up perhaps with rook d1 or rook ft1, rook ad1 or ft1, bishop b7, now rook ac1 in fact. Okay, so rook ac1 has other ideas as well. Maybe there's enough support of d4 at the moment. So rook c8 was played, now rook ft1. Okay, so this is the standard kind of looking position you would get against the Gruenfeld. You're holding the centre. There isn't that gambit which we saw in game 1. And black actually now, Anand plays c takes d4, and after c takes d4 plays the seemingly provocative queen d6, provoking, you know, e5 with tempo. But I'm not sure it's that dangerous here. If we have a quick look, e5, queen b6, say, maybe e6 looks dangerous, but on the other hand maybe it's not as dangerous as it looks. Maybe black has like f5 here. He doesn't really want to take because then bishop e6 check and that wins the exchange, but maybe f5 is playable here. Okay, so Topalov though, he didn't play e5. He played perhaps a surprising move. He played d5, which potentially loosens e5 control. But in this position the knight didn't go to e5. It would be a target actually, bishop b3 and say, you know, maybe h3 and f4 later. In fact it went to a5, and now after bishop b5 a couple of rooks came off and rook c8. So Topalov is faced with simplification here as white, which maybe he doesn't like. He's not going to get the kind of hack attack he did in game 1. After h3, so another pair of rooks come off. Now e6 was played, undermining white's centre. Topalov supports d5 with knight f4, and it seems, you know, black is quite comfortable here, not too many issues to deal with. King safety doesn't look like a major issue, for example. After ed, knight takes d5. White is offering a poisoned pawn. If white gets queen c8, and it's going to be, you know, like lethal here, for example, check, and then bishop h6 is to be avoided. Actually, though, you might ask in this position, well, maybe this isn't so lethal because black has a check and then queen d6 to defend their fate, or just queen d6. So let's have a quick look here. Check, check, and is there a perpetual? That's the first question. White could avoid the perpetual here by playing bishop f1, and in which case f8 would be lethal if check. There's a new variation, and then there's no way of defending f8. So say the black queen after bishop f1 goes back to d6. Now here, I'm just checking with Ribka here. It's given us as an advantage for white. So this is not as bad as my initial reaction that it was to do with an f8 disaster. But in fact, queen a8, black simply very tied down. This pinned bishop can't be that good. But let's check this. Maybe there's some liberating move like g5, for example. So let's check it. Well, if g5 hitting the bishop takes g5, white does stand better. Let's avoid g5 and let's see if black just stands solidly, just playing a move like queen b4. How can white make progress? Maybe bishop b5. And actually, to be honest, I'm not clear in this position. Maybe this was playable for black, just to hold on to f8 like this. It looks as though there's enough. I'm not sure what white's winning method is. I mean, because the white queen is kind of tied down. It can't take on a7 because the bishop takes h6. So maybe this isn't so bad, this continuation. It was just an option available to black, in fact, just to take on d5 and allow the invasory queen c8. So okay, let's get back to the main game. So after knight d5, and it actually just plays f5 to undermine that d5 knight. So it looks as though black's opening's been a success here. Looks fine. After f3, Anand loosens white's centre again with fe. After fe, queen e5. So Anand's got a nice looking position, currently threatening bishop d5 and queen takes e3. Nothing much. Well, especially if the queen's not protecting the bishop, that is. So the queen can't move too easily at the moment. Okay, but bishop d3 was played. Now knight c6. So knight's rerouting perhaps to d4. Now bishop a6 has played a tactical shot, making use of the c6 pressure. So bishop takes, queen takes c6. But knight d4, an interesting reply. So leaving the bishop temporarily unpre because of knight e2 as a threat, forking the queen and king. So queen c4 was played, so it's kind of tactical, threatening all sorts of things, double checks against the black king. So here, if for example bishop takes a6, then that I think is dangerous here. I'm looking at knight f6 and knight e7. I'm not totally sure though that they are actually winning. Maybe in fact queen a6 is strongest. Let's just check this position out of interest. Would the strongest move be to use the double check? Ah yes, not queen a6, knight f6, not knight e7. So knight f6, and if king f8, now queen g8 check. So king moves there, queen takes g7, and now this is getting unpleasant. So bishop takes d4 here, skewering the black queen. So this is what could have happened. If we have a look at this position, knight e7 check on the other hand, I'm not sure that's that effective. In fact, black's better now in this position. The check here, just king takes e7, so it makes all the difference in the world to play knight f6, because knight f6, if you look at it here, it's blocking the protection of the queen and bishop, making queen g8 and queen takes g7 possible. So that's the key variation, I believe. So queen c4, threatening knight f6 in particular. Let's rule out this. This is the major threat, knight f6, double check. So Anand calmly played bishop takes d5. After queen takes, so the queen's come off, Anand's really survives, his king's not in trouble like in game 1. He can now aim for a draw with black, which is a good achievement, especially against a player of Topalov's stature and rating.